The Gas Passer in Man vs. Machine is the most hated weapon in the history of TF2. Now I can already hear you thinking, but what about the Dead Ringer, the Scorch Shot, the Danger Shield, the Wrangler, the Diamondback, the Old Flog, the New Flog? All of them pale in comparison to the uncontested champion of bottling up vitriol and selling it on the street corner. A lot of people really do not like this weapon, but why is that? Well, I've stumbled through the chaos of many high tour communities, and if you look past the minor optical failings, there are some actually salient points to address. I invite you all to discuss in the comments below, just don't be a dick. I know that's a big ask for the MVM community, but try your best. With that out of the way, this is why MVM players hate the Gas Passer. On its own, the Gas Passer is the same shit stain of a weapon that it usually is. It takes 750 damage to fill while passively generating over the course of a minute. All of this for the benefit of 5 seconds of area denial. Normally this cloud is about as deadly as the mist setting on your garden hose, but in MVM, one little upgrade turns that shit into mustard gas. This is Explode on Ignite. Just 400 credits gives your lingering, massive AoE secondary burst damage higher than a crit rocket. You see all the shit up here? Pyro can one-shot all of this. Consistently, by the way. The funny thing is that when Jungle Inferno first dropped, the gas was able to restore its charge from the explosion itself. Think crit on kill for Demo Night, but with the range of Girardi. This was obviously a balanced nightmare, so Valve tossed the explosion charge and called it a day. But as we're all aware, there are 3 certainties in life: death, taxes, and Valve never doing enough to solve the problem. For a non-upgraded Pyro, 750 damage only amounts to 5 seconds of uninterrupted DPS. With max damage upgrades, this number is lowered to 2 seconds. And with crits, which you often get with Pyro's 2 best flamethrowers, gas charges in less than a second. And that's not even taking into account passive regen, which, for some reason, has a fucking recharge upgrade. Every tank, every giant, every goddamn sentry buster is a gas battery just waiting to be charged. It doesn't matter if you're dead. It doesn't matter if you're looking 180 degrees away from the mobs. And it doesn't even matter if the robots hold a weapon specifically designed to be resistant to range damage, you're getting that 350. I mean, is there a single item in the game that you can throw on the ground, take a teleporter back to spawn to buy upgrades, and come back to find that you've decimated the entire cluster? This is broken. Pyro never needed this. He already had great damage to giants, superb tank busting abilities, and adequate, albeit risky, crowd control. But now the gas has created a situation where Pyro hogs all the hit sounds for himself. This becomes particularly noticeable with robot heavies and bannered soldiers, as their high health pools and damage output often force some kind of oh shit mechanic. Be it a medic's ubercharge, a medic's shield, some kind of canteen, you know, abilities that were designed to be powerful at the cost of their spam ability. Mostly. And we can't rule out that maybe this was Valve's intention, to have the Gas Passer act as one of those oh shit mechanics. That did not happen. Instead, the Gas Passer completely threw that power for accessibility trade-off out the fucking window, and as a result made any decent Pyro the equivalent of a difficulty setting when dealing with any non-giant robots. And that's just on 2 cities. Think about other missions where medic isn't meta. I know I mainly focus on 2 cities with this channel because that's what the vast majority of people care about, including myself, but I have to mention just how hard this trivializes Mecha Engine. 2 out of the 3 missions are played on this map, Big Rock. You know where all the robots spawn from? Here. This tiny little corridor is where all of this spawns from. It's balanced out by the quantity of robots being much higher, but the Gas Passer doesn't care. Pyro only dominates even more. So at this point, I believe I've made a strong argument condemning the Gas Passer from a balancing and design perspective. People will often point to other cases like the Beggar's Bazooka, the Scottish Resistance, and explosive headshots as other textbook OP weapons in MVM. And they are. But the Beggars requires you to actually stand close to the robots to offset its accuracy nerf. The Scottish Resistance requires you to memorize every single robot spawn for every wave for every mission. And you have to communicate with your team's medic and/or NG in order to lay down the death traps. And as for explosive headshots, come on, I don't really need to explain the execution barrier there. I'm not arguing these abilities aren't overtuned. To argue otherwise would be a silly assertion. It is to say, however, that all of them require some form of risk, game sense, or skill investment in order to actually perform well. And this also coincides with a massive credit dump on the part of the player. What does a pyro using the gas passer have to learn in order to abuse the mechanic? Nothing. In fact, it serves as one big counter to Pyro's only real weakness in MVM. Stubby range. The one thing Pyro players actually had to get good at navigating so they don't die 9 times in one wave has been completely negated. And all of this comes in the form of a 400 credit, lingering AoE, 0 skill investment, safe to use secondary on a class that already had everything, but a player base so rife with clowns that almost no one could make it work. And yeah, we need to talk about that. For some of you, that answer might suffice as to why the gas passer is hated, but for many of you, that question is still left unanswered. Okay, so the gas passer is overpowered. So what? I used the metal blades, didn't you? This isn't a PvP game mode where someone has to suffer for another player to get their dopamine hit. But PvE balance does matter. I can't be the only one who's felt alienated from games like Warcraft or Pokemon due to their neutered progression systems. But in the context of MVM, this doesn't hold up. New players would experience kick after kick after kick for not using optimal loadouts or proper upgrades. And I assumed this was done to promote a bare minimum standard of competency amongst the player base. So now that the gas passer's in the game, why do high tours feel so differently? Well, here's the kicker. They don't. If you have any experience with the MVM community, you may have noticed that, on average, gas passer acceptance decreases as one's tour count grows. On the surface, this seems kind of strange. High tours are viewed as these meta-slaving basement dwellers who shit on newbies for not using what's viable. The gas passer is overtly viable, so why the big disconnect? It all comes down to one word: stakes. Take a new player to MVM. What is his desired goal? To complete the mission. Simple, right? Well, what about someone with 10 tours? At this point, a 2 cities player will have finished 40 missions. Just completing it has become trivial. So now maybe they shoot for games with no wave losses. Once that becomes trivial, maybe they strive for no strong pushbacks on the part of the robots. But at a certain point, you reach a brick wall where all the in-game mechanics that determine success are routinely conquered. What is an experienced player to focus on now that the basics are no longer stimulating? The answer, of course, is damage. Treating that number as a sort of catch-all measure to judge their own performance opens up a whole new band of progression for these hardcore players.
And the fact that Pyro, that dog shit ass piece of shit brain dead Pyro, can be anywhere close to me on the damage meters is an absolute fucking disgrace.
This next bit may not be too charitable to all the MVM newbies out there, and I'm sorry for that. We were all new and trash at the game at some point, and having a bit of empathy would do the player base some good. I'll get into it soon, but needless to say, I'm nowhere near a fan of Tacobot and their actions. But if I were to tell you that the stereotype of low tour pyros being dipshits didn't hold a shred of legitimacy, I would be lying right to your face. Despite a gas passer pyro being the only class in the game that can do pretty much everything, a new player insta-locking pyro is met with, let's call it discontent. On average, they suck. And not even in a funny way. Contrary to what people may assume from their experience in casual, an MVM pyro actually has to use their brain. You need to understand where to position yourself and manipulate the robot's aggro so they focus on the team's heavy or wrangled sentry instead of you. If you fail to do this, you will die. A lot. New players typically don't have the best game sense, so low tour pyros die. A lot. And that's not even getting into maneuvers like circle strafing, flog canceling, or proper angles on the tank to double your DPS, all of which are almost never done by new players. The only thing they bother to learn is upgrading Air Blast Force and becoming best friends with the Sentry Buster, or being a health on kill heavy's main source of protein. And why wouldn't they? That's what casual has taught them to do. In MVM, a low tour pyro will almost certainly be a worse player than a low tour heavy or a low tour soldier, but that doesn't necessarily mean they'll do less damage. The Gas Passer has introduced a way for pyro to do absurd DPS from range and one-shot uber medics, all while still having one of the most powerful primary weapons in the game at his disposal. It's no wonder that sniper and demo mains are a tad miffed at this. The Gas has made it so that a monkey pyro can outdamage the other classes in a fashion many feel is undeserved. And players don't like that. People don't think it's fair that someone can get good results of using a broken, easy-to-use mechanic. It's why melee players have always been okay with this, but not this. And that's also why Smash 4 sucked ass. The Gas has set a precedent that you don't necessarily need to be good at the game to achieve a high damage number, and this undermines that metric as a culmination of one's competency, and therefore makes experienced players' self-imposed goals seem less important. I think we can all agree that the toxicity surrounding the weapon is something we should work to mitigate as best we can. So, how do we do that? Obviously, it'd be ideal if Valve stepped in and nerfed the charge time, explosion damage, or both, or alternatively, they could just axe the explode upgrade altogether and give it a slow effect like the Girardi or the Mad Milk. But Valve would actually need to remove the thumb from their asshole, and we all know that's not happening anytime soon. So again, what do we do? Well, I'll tell you what we shouldn't do. We shouldn't create dedicated blacklist and smear campaigns for players who decide to make the optimal decision of using the Gas Passer. In the absence of a fix from the devs that put us in this shithole to begin with, some players have decided to crown themselves judge, jury, and executioner as to what should be accepted. Of the over 4,000 reports on the tacobot website, almost 1,000 of them relate to a pyro using the Gas Passer. And while many of them have grown more mellow, and contrary to what you may believe, you won't be kicked on sight with the vast majority of them, that fact doesn't change what has already been done and what some of their members are still doing. If you're publicly shaming people for making the correct decision by the same standards you were all upholding for years, you're an asshole. That's not to say that everyone who dislikes the Gas Passer is sympathetic to these actions. I mean, even DeWill, the guy who blew the lid on tacobot's toxicity to begin with, is himself against the Gas Passer. But this should be condemned without question. How can you advocate an efficient, non-intrusive path to victory, but suddenly, when a weapon comes along that's too easy to be effective with, you flip the script entirely? It's very clear that at least a few Tacobot members have a vision as to what they believe the default state of the game should be. So they create this blacklist as a negative reinforcement mechanism to dissuade new players from using the Gas Passer, creating a culture that better suits what they find fun in MVM. But there lies the tremendous hypocrisy. If your own personal enjoyment trumps class optimization, tell that to the hundreds of players you've kicked for wanting to prioritize their own enjoyment over what was best for the team. According to them, you should play efficiently, but not too efficiently. Give me a fucking break. I'm not gonna deny there isn't a valid debate to be had about fun versus efficiency and where the lines are drawn. The baseline assumption is that fun is all that matters, but if your engineer is using the gunslinger or your soldier decides to do some market gardening, I find it very hard to believe that all of you would F2 that boat kick lest you trample on their fun. Despite that realization, we need to understand that drawing a cohesive line that everyone will agree with is borderline impossible. So rather than dwell on that philosophical discussion, I propose a more pragmatic solution. A while back, Soundsmith made a video talking about the relationship between friendlies and tryhards in TF2. To summarize his argument, casual's default state is working with your team, killing other players, capturing objectives, all that good shit. But if over 50% of the server agrees that need not be how that specific game is played, and everyone would just rather conga around the map for 30 minutes while eating sandwiches, the default state of the game has now been changed, and new players who join that server should either adapt to the majority or leave. I think this relationship translates very nicely over to MVM. The game's default state should be one that encourages choosing the correct upgrades, loadouts, and strategies, yet does not necessitate it to succeed. So, in other words, if someone bitches at a pyro for using what's optimal, that pyro shouldn't have to switch off the gas passer to appease the other player. The pyro is appealing to the default intention of the game, and therefore the solution is not for him to change his behavior, but for the one shit-talking him to fuck off. However, I apply this exact same standard to low tours as well. If you're gonna play direct hit soldier or Tomislav heavy, that burden you place on yourself from purposefully not doing what's optimal is felt by your entire team, not just you. It's not everyone else's responsibility to make up for your own intentional handicapping. And if they want to kick you, that doesn't make them meta slaves or toxic tryhards, they just don't want to carry dead weight. This is why I don't personally hate the gas passer. Besides the degenerate gambler in me enjoying speeding up my pull on the world's slowest slot machine lever, if I discourage the use of the gas passer, I can't defend what I believe to be the best philosophy surrounding MVM, striving for competence. We should not set a default standard of promoting gameplay that intentionally wastes the time of your teammates. The keywords being default standard. Like in the Soundsmith video, if 50% of the team don't want you using gas, or if 50% of the team agree that using a meme loadout is fine, then the default state of the game at that point should be seen as modified, and players can do as they wish. I think that's an approach that's a good compromise for everybody. But back to the original question, why do MVM players hate the gas passer? Well, because it's overpowered is an incredibly reductive statement. Rather, the gas passer is an injustice of game design. It turns Pyro into a walking contradiction for what constitutes MVM skill progression for a lot of players, and many believe that the game was in a better state before its introduction. It doesn't encourage new Pyros to play in any more of a strategic way, and only makes actually competent Pyros able to capitalize in what many believe is a unskilled way. That being said, I don't really care. Thanks for watching the video, guys. I have a feeling this video is going to rub a lot of people the wrong way. I've seen the discussion around this weapon, and it's very, very black and white. If you're pro-gas passer, you're a shitty low-tour player who needs to be carried, and if you're anti-gas passer, you're a fucking toxic elitist tacobot shill, or whatever it is. Another thing I want to add is I was not expecting to get this many subs this fast. The support that you guys have shown has really been phenomenal, and if you stuck all the way to the end, please know I appreciate it. I appreciate it so much, and I'm not stopping anytime soon. That's all I got, guys. Thank you all for watching the video. See ya.